Brain had his reservations on how they taught. In his mind, his practical swordsmanship training was more useful than their performative swordsmanship practice. Compared to waving air around for a few hundred times, training with a real sword, even if it was a mock sword, was much more effective. Brain believed that his method would allow one to gain more muscle memory than simply exercising one's body. However, this was a good way to allow them to learn the techniques first, and build up a foundation solid enough that they would be less likely to die in actual combat. It was hard to say definitively which side was right or wrong. Though they all had gained strength, they had completely different ways of living. It would be troublesome for Brain if the children die in combat before they even had the chance to fully realize their talents. That was why he opted to have the children train with the two, while passing down his own experiences. As a result, the children's training regimen had become harsher. Were their accommodations finalized? Yup, they were finally finalized. They're scheduled to travel northwest, with a group of merchants operating in a city close to Council State. The woman frowned a little. It's been 2 weeks since the Sorcerer's Kingdom declared war on us, but there hasn't been news of either country's armies mobilizing. According to some rumors I've heard, the Sorcerer's Kingdom only wants to force the kingdom to back down in some negotiation, and does not actually want to fight a full-on war. If that was true, wouldn't that render Mr. Ungloss's efforts in vain? Would that Sorcerer King really do such a thing? If Brain had not met the Sorcerer King in person, he would have believed that this was just a negotiation tactic too. But as a witness to that tragic battle, it was hard for him not to doubt that the Sorcerer King was plotting something. Perhaps he was preparing to cast that spell again. Had Brain's uneasiness spread to her? The woman spoke in a hushed tone. Mr. Ungloss had met with that Sorcerer King. Not only have I met him, I bore witness to his duel with Gazif. I still don't know what happened to Gazif till this day. Her gaze shifted towards Brain's waist. Sheathed by his side was one of the treasures of the kingdom, the razor edge. This was something that was granted to him when the war was declared, even though he had turned it down on numerous occasions. To Brain, this sword was too heavy of a burden for him to bear, so he treated it as something that was entrusted to him for safekeeping only. He did not intend to unsheath the sword. Though this sword was like a hot potato that he would rather pass on to someone else, if that person could not match Gazif Stronov's abilities, he did not intend to just give it away so easily. A duel with Mr. Stronov. She stopped herself before she could complete that sentence. Perhaps she wanted to say something along the lines of, I wish I was there to witness it too. Brain did not think too much of it, after all she was a warrior too. To wish to bear witness to Gazif's duel was natural for them. No, it was more appropriate to say that he wanted her to witness it too. He had just said that he still could not figure out what had happened during that duel, so if someone else could explain it to him that would be best. I think the Sorcerer King is plotting something, but I'm not sure what exactly he is plotting. I don't have a basis for that thought after all. My instincts are blaring alarms right now, and I tend to trust my instincts without question. If it's the warrior instincts of someone like Mr. Ungloss, then it just might be true. I'm not too sure on the specifics. Anyways, we have to get these brats out of this place as soon as possible. Even if I die, they could still make a living for themselves with the swordsmanship I've taught them, even if it's not that significant of a skill. Actually, our sensei had told us the same thing as Mr. Ungloss, that the Sorcerer's Kingdom is plotting something in the dark. So, when the children are to be sent away. The woman looked towards the silent man next to her. Could you request that he go along with them? Would he do that? He glanced at the man who gave him a silent nod. He appeared to be annoyed, but that was probably not the case. It wouldn't be inaccurate to say that this man was patient with children. Though all of the 6 great disciples had been here at some point, the one the children liked the most out of them all was him. Yes, Sensei appeared to have given it some consideration already. As long as he lives, our swordsmanship could continue being passed down through the generations. In other words, they had the same thought as Brain. If that was the case, he had no reason to reject their request. I do not mind as long as your end is fine with it. Having said that, I am grateful for you all. I'll go speak to the merchants who will be taking them away. Brain heard the man mutter a few words in a quiet voice, probably something along the lines of please take good care of me. Brain raised his hand as a response, to which the man responded in kind by deeply nodding his head. Now then, after the brats have rested up it'll be my turn to train them. Sorry to have troubled the both of you to train them while I was away. Gratitude was the only thing that flowed out of his mouth. Even though he hadn't paid them much, they still took the time to teach the children. Their sensei Vesture had probably considered the fact that Brain was one who wielded outstanding swordsmanship, and so wanted to introduce his 6 great disciples to him, perhaps making Brain owe him a favor in the process, so Brain's gratitude was not that great. The 6 great disciples were different on the other hand. Perhaps they had their interests piqued at the prospect of being able to train children that someone who could beat them handily, Brain, had judged had potential, or perhaps they were just interested in passing down skills to the children that they could use to survive. In any case, they were motivated to help the children without any ulterior motives from the start. Because he had been acting as the personal bodyguard of the princess, he had to come into contact with those annoying nobles. This was why people as straightforward as the 6 great disciples shone even brighter in his eyes. I do have to say that I was quite impressed by how magnanimous Mr. Ungloss really was. To have adopted these children and teach them skills so that they could survive. Brain's expression darkened. He hadn't done any charity that was worthy of such praise. Stop flattering me. I'm not that nice of a guy. Well, it's true that I picked these children up from the slums. It was for a purpose. There were ones that were on the verge of death, yet I still walked past them without lifting a finger to help. If you want to praise someone for their charity, do it to someone who actually deserves it, like the princess for example. He could see that the woman had a perplexed expression, but he wasn't sure what had caused it. Are you talking about Princess Runner-sama? About how she had funded her orphanage? It's true that the princess had done something extraordinary, but I believe that Mr. Brain had also accomplished what no other person could. Aren't you both equally worthy of praise? Does it look like I could get through to you? Think whatever you want to, but don't do it in front of me. I'd have heartaches from the guilt alone. Then I do apologize. No, don't think too much about it, it was a joke. I'm not innocent enough to feel guilt from something so small. Brain shifted his gaze away from the shocked expression on her face, and looked towards Gazostronov's, now Brain's, residence. His thoughts were of the children who had just had their fill and were probably sleeping right now. In a room on the 9th floor of Nazark, approximately a month after the war was declared. In one of the rooms that was reserved for potential new guild members were Ains and the floor guardians. They sat around a C-shaped desk, reading through the documents prepared for this meeting. As a side note, it wasn't just the floor guardians who were there. Behind each of them stood an equal number of ordinary maids, and behind Ains stood Pistonia. They were there to take care of the occasional odd job, and thus stood silently behind them all. Ains could not grasp the reasoning behind why they were silent. Apparently it was to symbolize that they were tools, ready to be used. For that reason, Ains paid them no attention at all to satisfy their wishes. Yumu. Ains read the documents in earnest, but felt as though his focus was being sapped away by Pistonia's presence behind him. Still, he tried to focus his attention on the task as best as he could. Since they had to exchange their opinions on the subject matter later on, it was natural for Ains to have anxious thoughts such as, how embarrassing it would be if I were to say something crazy later on. In any case, this was different from the documents that Albedo usually sent from Nazark regarding topics such as politics, economics, and law. This was something that even someone like Ains could understand. Even with the utmost amount of kindness, Ains's intelligence could only be judged as average at best. To ask someone to find the qualities within him that would qualify him to rule over a country would be to impose onto them the impossible. That was not to say that he was lazy. In fact, he was the diligent type to try his best at everything that was thrown at him. This was further exacerbated by the misunderstandings held by the NPCs of Nazark. His intelligence was incomparably higher than his. In order to meet their expectations, Ains could not afford to be lazy. At first, he was doing so out of his desire to keep the NPCs loyal, but now it was more out of his desire as a father figure to not disappoint his children. It had come to a point where he was reading books on self-development and business. He had also been trying his best to improve himself in combat tactics, one of the only subjects he could claim expertise in. Though it was safe to leave everything up to Albedo and the rest, there were still a lot of things that they found to be necessary to consult with Ains. If he were to say anything stupid when that time comes and they were to respond with, as Ains-sama wills, it shall be done, and take immediate action, it could cause serious collateral damage. To avoid that outcome, Ains's personal growth was imperative. Because of this, Ains had taken a particular interest in this document, and was even more focused on it than he would have usually been. Ains, upon finishing most of it and confirming that the appointed time had come, said, "Now then, has everybody finished reading?" "Yes, Ains-sama." As their representative, Albedo took a glance at everybody and replied, "Excellent. Now, wait, before that. Though it has been a month since we declared war against the kingdom, they have not noticed our invasion at all. They must still think that our forces are still holed up in Irantal. Demiurge, good job. Your ability to deftly manage everything so that not a single piece of intel was leaked was seriously impressive. I'm grateful to receive my master's compliments. On the same note, to have threatened a portion of the kingdom's nobility into rebelling was also a splendid accomplishment, Albedo. Thank you very much, Ains-sama." Albedo, like Demiurge, lowered her head.